Chapter 1. The Storm Before. Victor Copeland pressed his face against the small airline window, watching the rain slash across the glass in violent sheets. The storm had come from nowhere, turning what should have been a routine business trip into a nightmare of delayed flights and frustrated passengers. Around him, travelers grumbled into their phones, but Victor remained silent, his steel-gray eyes fixed on the tempest outside. At 42, Victor had built his reputation on being unshakable. As head of security for Everett Industries, one of the largest private military contracting firms in the country, he'd learned that emotion was a luxury he couldn't afford. His colleagues respected him for his cold efficiency, his ability to make hard decisions without flinching. Some called him ruthless. Victor preferred the term practical. His phone buzzed with a text from Crystal, his wife of 15 years, taking Angel to the cabin for the weekend. Weather's supposed to clear up there. Don't worry about us. Face blowing a kiss. Victor stared at the message, something nagging at him. The cabin was their retreat in the Cascade Mountains, a place he'd bought after his first major contract with the military. It was isolated, peaceful, and usually, Crystal hated going there without him. She complained about the lack of cell service, the primitive conditions, the way the silence seemed to press in on her. He scrolled up through their recent messages, noting the subtle changes in her tone over the past few months. Shorter responses, less affection, more time spent with friends he'd never met. Victor's training had taught him to notice patterns, and the pattern here was becoming clear. Ladies and gentlemen, due to severe weather conditions, Flight 447 to Seattle has been canceled. The gate agent's voice crackled over the intercom. We'll be rescheduling passengers on tomorrow morning's flights. Victor closed his eyes and leaned back in the uncomfortable airport chair. He thought about his daughter Angel, 11 years old, with Crystal's blonde hair but his sharp intelligence. She was the one soft spot in his carefully constructed armor, the only person who could make him laugh without reservation. Recently, though, even Angel had seemed distant, spending more time in her room, avoiding his attempts at conversation. As he sat there, surrounded by the chaos of stranded travelers, Victor's mind drifted to his past. He'd met Crystal Rivera when she was a struggling dancer in Portland, all curves and ambition and desperate hunger for something better. He'd been fresh out of the army, still carrying the shadows of 3 tours in Afghanistan, and she'd represented everything bright and hopeful in a world that had shown him too much darkness. The marriage had been good at first. Crystal had softened his edges, taught him how to smile again. When Angel was born, Victor had felt something he'd never experienced before, a love so fierce it terrified him. He'd sworn that nothing would ever hurt his family. But somewhere along the way, things had shifted. Crystal grew restless as Victor's career demanded more travel, more dangerous assignments. She complained that he was never home, that when he was cold and distant. Victor had tried to explain that his work required compartmentalization, that he couldn't bring that darkness home to them, but Crystal never seemed to understand. His phone rang, jolting him from his thoughts. Harris Robbins, the local sheriff near their cabin, appeared on the screen. Victor? Thank God I caught you. Listen, I need to ask you something, and I want you to stay calm. Victor's training kicked in immediately. When someone told you to stay calm, it usually meant you were about to receive news that would make staying calm impossible. What's the situation, Harris? Your wife called our office about an hour ago. Said she was driving down the mountain because of the storm, but her car broke down about 10 miles from your place. She asked us to check on Angel, said the girl was alone at the cabin. Ice formed in Victor's stomach. Alone? Crystal said they were going together. That's what's got me worried. When we sent a deputy up there, the place was locked up tight. No signs of life. No car in the driveway. We're heading up there now with proper equipment, but I wanted to give you a heads up. Victor was already moving, heading for the car rental counter. I'm on my way. Should be there by morning if I drive through the night. Victor, the roads are. I'll get there. The line went dead. As Victor signed the rental papers with hands that didn't shake despite the growing dread in his chest, he tried to piece together what was happening. Crystal's lie about taking Angel was just the beginning. If she'd left their daughter alone during a storm this severe, it meant something was seriously wrong. Victor had learned long ago that when people you trusted started lying, it was never just one lie. It was always the tip of an iceberg, and the truth lurking beneath was usually worse than anything you could imagine. He had 8 hours of driving ahead of him to figure out what that truth might be. Chapter 2. The Call That Changed Everything. Victor's rental car cut through the mountain darkness like a blade, its headlights carving brief glimpses of the treacherous road ahead. The storm had passed, leaving behind a crystalline night that made every shadow seem sharp and threatening. He'd been driving for 6 hours, fueled by black coffee and growing dread, when his phone rang. The caller ID showed Angel's number, the cell phone he'd insisted she carry for emergencies. "Angel? Baby, where are you?" The sound that came through the speaker made Victor's blood freeze. His daughter was sobbing, not the dramatic tears of a child who'd scraped her knee, but the deep, terrified wails of someone who understood real danger. "Daddy." Angel's voice was raw, desperate. "Daddy, please come home. Please." Victor's foot pressed harder on the accelerator. "I'm coming, sweetheart. I'm almost there." "What's wrong? Where's your mother?" "Mommy left." The words came out in a rush between sobs. "Mommy left with Uncle Don. They nailed the door shut, Daddy. I can't get out." "Uncle Don." Victor's hands tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. Don Davies had been Victor's best friend since their Army days, the best man at his wedding, Angel's godfather. Don, who'd been coming around more often lately, always when Victor was away on business. Don, who Crystal always seemed so happy to see. "Angel, listen to me carefully. Are you hurt?" "No, but I'm scared. It's so dark and cold, and there's no electricity. Daddy, why would Mommy leave me here?" Victor's mind raced. The cabin had a generator, plenty of food, and a landline for emergencies. If the power was out and Angel was trapped inside, it meant someone had deliberately disabled the safety measures he'd put in place. "Sweetheart, I need you to go to the kitchen and look under the sink. There's a toolbox back there. Can you do that?" He heard Angel moving, her footsteps echoing in the cabin. "I found it. Good girl. There's a crowbar in there. Can you reach it?" "It's heavy, but I got it." "Perfect. Now I want you to go to the back door and try to pry off the boards. Start from the bottom and work your way up." As Angel worked, Victor's phone showed another incoming call. "Crystal." He let it go to voicemail, his focus entirely on his daughter. "Daddy, I got one board off. That's my girl. Keep going. I'm only 2 hours away now." But as he said it, Victor noticed something that made his stomach drop. Angel's signal was getting weaker, cutting in and out. In the mountains, that usually meant, "Daddy? Daddy, I smell smoke." The line went dead. Victor immediately tried calling back, but the call went straight to voicemail. He tried the cabin's landline. Nothing. His mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Fire in the mountains was a death sentence, especially for someone trapped inside a building. His phone buzzed with a voicemail notification. Crystal's message. With hands that trembled for the first time in years, Victor played it back. "Victor, darling." Crystal's voice was light, almost cheerful. "I hope you're not too worried about our little angel. You know, I've been thinking about this moment for months, planning exactly what I'd say to you." Victor's blood turned to ice water. "The truth is, I've hated that little brat since the day she was born. Do you know what it's like, watching your husband love someone more than he's ever loved you? Watching him light up for her in ways he never did for me." The laugh that came through the speaker was cold, brittle. "Don and I have been planning this for a while now. A fresh start, somewhere far away from your suffocating presence. And don't worry about Angel. By the time you get there, it'll all be over. Consider it my parting gift to you. Now you'll know what real loss feels like." The message ended. Victor pulled over to the side of the mountain road, his chest heaving. In his years of military service, he'd seen atrocities that would break most men's minds. He'd lost friends to enemy fire, watched good soldiers die in his arms. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for this level of betrayal. The woman he'd loved, protected, and provided for had just confessed to attempting to murder their daughter. His best friend, a man he'd trusted with his life countless times, was part of it. Victor's phone rang again. This time it was Harris Robbins. "Victor, I need you to pull over if you're driving." "I'm already stopped." Victor's voice was deadly calm. "What did you find?" "There was a fire at your cabin tonight. We got a call from someone reporting smoke around midnight. By the time our crews got up there." Harris paused. "I'm sorry, Victor. We found a small body inside. It's badly burned, but based on the size and the location where we found it." The words seemed to come from very far away. Victor stared out at the dark mountains, feeling something fundamental break inside his chest. "The body," he said quietly. "Where exactly did you find it?" "Main bedroom. Looked like she was trying to hide under the bed." "Victor, I'm so sorry. I've got kids of my own, and I can't imagine." "Anyone else at the scene?" "No sign of your wife or anyone else. We found evidence that the doors had been barricaded from the outside, and the generator had been sabotaged. This wasn't an accident, Victor. This was murder." Victor ended the call and sat in the silence of his rental car, surrounded by the vast indifference of the mountains. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear the wind moving through the trees, carrying with it the smell of smoke and ash. When Victor Copeland finally started the car again and continued toward what remained of his cabin, the man behind the wheel was not the same person who had started this journey. That man had been capable of love, forgiveness, even mercy. This man was something else entirely. Chapter 3: Ashes and Awakenings. The smoking ruins of the cabin looked like a mouth full of broken teeth against the dawn sky. Victor stood at the edge of the clearing, watching the last wisps of smoke curl up from the charred remains of what had once been his sanctuary. The fire department's trucks were gone now, leaving only yellow tape and the acrid smell of burned dreams. Harris Robbins approached carefully, his weathered face etched with the kind of sympathy that came from delivering too much bad news over the years. "Victor, you shouldn't be here. The structure's not safe, and the investigation." "Where?" Victor's voice was flat, emotionless. Harris hesitated. "Where what? Where did you find her?" "Victor, show me." Harris led him around the perimeter of the cabin to what had been Angel's bedroom. The walls were gone, but the foundation remained, along with the twisted metal frame of her bed. A section of floorboard had been marked with chalk. "There," Harris said quietly. "Under the bed, like I told you." Victor stared at the spot, his trained eye taking in details the local sheriff might have missed. The burn pattern was wrong. The debris field didn't match what he'd expect from someone who died trying to hide. And the position. "Harris, did your people take photographs of the scene before they moved the body?" "Of course. Standard procedure." "What? I want to see them." "Victor, I don't think that's a good idea. You're in shock, and seeing those images. I've seen worse." Victor's gray eyes met the sheriff's. "I need to see them." An hour later, Victor sat in Harris's office, methodically examining the crime scene photographs. His military training kicked in, allowing him to compartmentalize his grief and focus on the details. What he saw confirmed his suspicions. "This isn't Angel." Harris looked up from his paperwork. "What?" Victor pointed to one of the photographs. "The body position, the size, the jewelry. Look at this necklace. It's sterling silver with a butterfly pendant. Angel's allergic to silver. She breaks out in a rash if she wears it for more than an hour." "Victor, I understand this is hard to accept. And look at the hands." Victor's finger traced the outline in the photograph. No calluses on the fingertips. Angel's been taking guitar lessons for 2 years. She has permanent calluses. Harris leaned over the photographs, studying them more carefully. The medical examiner said the burns made identification difficult. "We were going on circumstantial evidence. The location, the size. Who else knew we'd be at the cabin this weekend?" "I don't know." "What?" Victor was already moving, heading for the door. "Because whoever burned my daughter set up a decoy, which means she might still be alive." "Victor, wait. Where are you going?" "To find my wife." Victor's first stop was Don Davies's apartment in downtown Portland. He used the key Don had given him years ago, back when they were still brothers in arms, before Betrayal had redefined everything. The apartment was empty, but not abandoned. Victor's trained eye cataloged the missing items: clothes, toiletries, important documents. This was a planned departure, not a panicked flight. In the bedroom, he found something that made his jaw clench: one of Crystal's earrings on the nightstand, and a hotel receipt dated 2 months ago. They'd been planning this for far longer than Crystal had admitted in her voicemail. Victor's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop looking, or she really will die. You have 48 hours to transfer $2 million to the account I'll send you. No police. No tricks. Just the money, and you'll see your daughter again." So Angel was alive. The relief that flooded through Victor was immediately followed by cold fury. They'd burned down his cabin, traumatized his daughter, and faked her death, all for money. Victor typed back, "Proof of life first." The response came within minutes, a video file. Victor opened it with hands that didn't shake, though his heart hammered against his ribs. Angel sat in what looked like a motel room, very much alive but clearly terrified. Her hands were zip-tied behind her back, and there was duct tape across her mouth. Don Davies's voice could be heard from behind the camera. "Say hello to Daddy, sweetheart." Angel's eyes were wide with fear, but Victor could see something else there: anger. His daughter had inherited more than just his intelligence. She had his capacity for cold fury when crossed. The video ended with Don's voice. "You've got 47 hours and 53 minutes. The bank account information will be sent separately. And Victor, we know about your special skills. Try anything heroic, and the next video you get will be very different." Victor saved the video and began studying every frame, every detail. The motel room's decor, the view out the window, the sounds in the background. He'd spent years finding people who didn't want to be found. This time, the stakes were higher than they'd ever been. But as Victor began to plan, he realized that Don and Crystal had made a fundamental miscalculation. They'd assumed that threatening Angel would make him compliant, desperate, willing to pay any price for her return. They were wrong. Threatening Angel had done something else entirely. It had awakened something in Victor that he'd kept carefully buried since leaving the military, something dark and merciless and utterly without conscience. Victor Copeland, the loving father and husband, was gone, burned away in the ashes of his cabin. What remained was Victor Copeland, the hunter, the predator, the man who'd once been described by his commanding officer as frighteningly efficient at solving problems that require extreme solutions. Don and Crystal wanted money, but what they were going to get was a reckoning. As Victor drove away from Don's empty apartment, he was already formulating a plan that would make their betrayal seem merciful by comparison. He had 47 hours to find them. It would be more than enough. Chapter 4: The Hunter's Trail. Victor's black SUV sat outside the Cascade Valley Bank like a predator watching its prey. Through the tinted windows, he observed the morning routine of the small-town financial institution where he'd maintained accounts for 15 years. The bank manager, Emmett Goodman, had called him twice since the fire, offering condolences and asking about accessing Angel's education fund. Standard procedure, he'd said. But Victor had learned long ago that in his line of work, there was no such thing as coincidence. He waited until the lunch rush, when the lobby would be busy and distractions plentiful, before entering. Emmett spotted him immediately, a heavy-set man in his 50s who'd grown soft from years of small-town banking. "Victor, I'm so sorry for your loss. We're all devastated about little Angel." Victor studied Emmett's face with the same intensity he'd once used to identify enemy combatants. The sympathy seemed genuine, but there was something else: nervousness, guilt, the telltale signs of a man carrying secrets. "I appreciate that, Emmett. I need to discuss some account transfers." Of course. Let's go to my office." In the privacy of Emmett's office, Victor leaned back in his chair and smiled, the kind of smile that had made enemy prisoners very cooperative. "Before we start, Emmett, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer." Emmett's face paled slightly. "Okay. In the past 6 months, has anyone asked you about my accounts? My wife, perhaps? Or my friend Don Davies?" The blood drained from Emmett's face completely. "Victor, banking regulations prevent me from." Victor leaned forward, his gray eyes boring into Emmett's. "My daughter is alive, Emmett. The people who took her think I'm going to transfer $2 million to pay for her return. Now, those people had to know I had access to that kind of money, which means someone told them." Emmett's hands began to shake. "Victor, please, you don't understand. Help me understand. Your wife, she came in about 3 months ago. Said she was planning a surprise for your anniversary, something about a new house. She wanted to know about liquidating your investment accounts." Victor's voice remained dangerously calm. "And you told her? She's your wife. She had your power of attorney documents. Forged, I assume." Emmett nodded miserably. "We didn't know until after. Don Davies came in last week, said you'd authorized him to handle some transfers while you were dealing with the tragedy. He had documentation, signatures. How much did they take? Nothing from your main accounts. But they did get the access codes, account numbers, everything they'd need to know exactly how much you're worth." Victor stood up slowly. "Emmett, I want you to call your security company. Tell them you need the surveillance footage from last week. All of it. I can't just." "You can, and you will. Because when this is over, We're going to have a conversation about your bank's security protocols. And depending on how cooperative you are now, that conversation will either be with me or with federal investigators. 20 minutes later, Victor sat in the bank's security office, watching grainy surveillance footage on a small monitor. When Don Davies appeared on screen, Victor felt something cold settle in his chest. Don moved through the bank with the confidence of someone who belonged there, chatting easily with the tellers, even flirting with the young receptionist. But it was what happened next that made Victor's blood run cold. Angel appeared in the footage, walking beside Don like they were old friends. She looked relaxed, even happy. There was no sign of coercion, no indication that she was being held against her will. Victor rewound the footage and watched it again, studying his daughter's body language. She trusted Don completely. More than that, she seemed excited about whatever he was telling her. The timestamp showed this was 5 days ago, 2 days before the cabin incident. Victor's phone buzzed with another message from the kidnappers. 36 hours left. Hope you're liquidating those accounts. Angel is getting impatient to see her daddy again. Another video followed. This time, Angel was in what looked like a different room. The zip ties were gone, and she was eating what appeared to be pizza. She looked directly at the camera and smiled. Not the terrified smile of a hostage, but the genuine expression of a child who thought she was part of some elaborate game. Victor replayed this video 3 times, each viewing confirming what he'd begun to suspect. Angel wasn't just alive, she was complicit. The realization hit him like a physical blow. His own daughter, the one person he'd thought was innocent in all this, had been part of the plan from the beginning. The sobbing phone call, the terror in her voice, it had all been an act. Victor's phone rang. Crystal's number. He answered without speaking. Hello, darling. Crystal's voice was mocking, playful. How are those account transfers coming along? Where are you? Close enough to see you, far enough to stay safe. Don said you looked very intense at the bank today. Poor Emmett looked like he was going to have a heart attack. Victor stepped outside the bank, scanning the street for any sign of surveillance. You trained Angel well. Oh, you figured that part out? I'm impressed. She really is a talented little actress, isn't she? All those drama classes finally paid off. Why? Why what? Why did I seduce your best friend? Why did I turn your daughter against you? Why did I decide to destroy your perfect little life? Victor found the perfect vantage point. A parking garage across the street where someone with binoculars could observe the bank without being seen. Because you never loved us, Crystal continued. You loved the idea of us. The perfect family, the beautiful wife, the adoring daughter. But you never actually saw us as real people with our own needs and desires. Victor began moving toward the parking garage, his steps measured and silent. Angel figured it out first, you know. How cold you really are. How you only show affection when we behave exactly the way you want us to. She told me about the time you ignored her for 3 days because she got a B on her math test. I wanted her to do better. You wanted her to be perfect, just like you wanted me to be perfect. The grateful little wife who never questioned why you were gone so much, never asked about the blood on your clothes when you came back from those consulting jobs. Victor reached the parking garage and began climbing the stairs, moving like the predator he'd been trained to be. Well, guess what, Victor? We're not perfect. We're human beings who got tired of being your dolls. And now we're going to take everything you have and disappear somewhere you'll never find us. Victor reached the 3rd floor and spotted them immediately. Crystal stood at the concrete barrier, looking through binoculars at the bank below. Don sat in a car nearby, engine running, ready for a quick escape. But there was no sign of Angel. 36 hours, Victor. Don't disappoint us. The line went dead. Victor smiled as he began to plan their capture. They thought they were hunters, stalking him from a distance. But they'd made the classic mistake of assuming their prey was helpless. They were about to learn the difference between a victim and a predator. Chapter 5. The Predator's Gambit. The abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Portland had been Victor's idea, a place where sound couldn't travel and questions wouldn't be asked. He'd acquired it years ago through a shell company, one of several properties he'd purchased as potential safe houses during his more dangerous contracting days. Don Davies hung from the ceiling by his wrists, conscious but wishing he wasn't. Blood dripped steadily from his nose onto the concrete floor, each drop echoing in the cavernous space. Victor had been very precise in his questioning, applying just enough pressure to ensure honesty without causing permanent damage. Yet, I'm going to ask you one more time, Victor said, his voice carrying the same conversational tone he might use to discuss the weather. Where is my daughter? Don's response was a string of curses that Victor had heard many times during their army days. Back then, they'd been directed at enemy combatants. Now they were aimed at him. Victor nodded and walked to a metal table where he'd arranged various tools with surgical precision. He selected a pair of bolt cutters and tested their grip. Your choice, Victor said, approaching Don's dangling form. Fingers or toes first. You're insane. Don spat blood. She's just a kid. My kid, who you've turned into a collaborator in your little scheme. Victor positioned the bolt cutters around Don's pinky finger. I spent 3 tours learning how to extract information from people who really didn't want to give it up. Compared to Taliban commanders, you're going to be embarrassingly easy. The pressure on Don's finger increased just enough to break the skin. Okay. She's at the Morrison Motel on Highway 26. Room 127. Victor's smile was cold. See? That wasn't so hard. But instead of releasing Don, Victor increased the pressure until he heard the distinctive crack of breaking bone. Don's scream echoed off the warehouse walls. That was for thinking I'm stupid enough to believe your first answer. Don's face had gone white with shock and pain. It's true. She's really there. Maybe. But you see, Don, I have a problem. I can't trust anything you say because you've already proven you're comfortable lying to me. So I'm going to ask you some questions I already know the answers to, and we'll see how honest you're willing to be. Victor selected a different tool, a medical-grade scalpel. Question 1. How long have you been sleeping with my wife? Don's eyes darted around the warehouse as if looking for an escape route that didn't exist. 6 months. Victor made a small incision on Don's forearm. Precise, clean, just deep enough to hurt. Wrong. I found hotel receipts going back 18 months. Try again. 2 years. Don gasped. It's been 2 years. Better. Question 2. When did you first approach Angel about helping with your plan? We never. She's just a kid, Victor. We wouldn't involve a child in. The scalpel found Don's other arm. This cut was deeper. I have surveillance footage of Angel at the bank with you, looking very comfortable and happy. She knew exactly what was happening when she made that phone call to me. So let's try this again. When did you recruit my daughter? Don was crying now, tears mixing with the blood on his face. Last Christmas. Crystal thought. She thought Angel was old enough to understand how unhappy she was. How unhappy we both were. Victor felt something break inside his chest. Not his heart, that had shattered days ago, but something harder and more fundamental. His own daughter had been planning his destruction for almost a year. Question 3. Victor continued, his voice never wavering from its conversational tone. How did you plan to keep me from tracking you down after you got the money? New identities. Don has contacts from his military days, people who specialize in helping folks disappear. Don? You mean yourself? Don's eyes went wide as he realized his mistake. I meant I have contacts. Victor set down the scalpel and picked up a blowtorch. You know what I think? I think there are more people involved in this than just you and Crystal. I think this is a bigger operation, and you're just the front man. The flame sprang to life with a soft whoosh. I think someone studied my habits, my resources, my relationships, and put together a very sophisticated plan to not just steal my money, but to destroy me emotionally in the process. The fake death, the betrayal by my best friend, the discovery that my own daughter was part of it, that's not just theft, that's psychological warfare. Victor moved the flame closer to Don's exposed skin. So question 4. Who else is involved? Nobody. It's just us. The flame kissed Don's shoulder, and his scream was ear-splitting. Wrong answer. Victor's phone rang. He stepped away from Don and answered without checking the caller ID. Daddy. Angel's voice came through the speaker, sweet and innocent. Daddy, are you okay? Uncle Don said you seemed upset. Victor looked at Don's hanging form, noting the way his eyes had gone wide with surprise. Genuine surprise. I'm fine, sweetheart. Where are you? I'm safe. But Daddy, Uncle Don and Mommy said you're being very mean. They said you hurt Uncle Don. Victor's mind raced. If Angel was calling him freely, if she could hear the conversation, then either they were incredibly confident in their control over the situation, or, Angel, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Are you alone right now? Yes, Daddy. Mommy and Uncle Don went to get food. Victor looked at Don again, taking in the man's obvious confusion and growing fear. Sweetheart, is there anyone else there? Anyone you haven't mentioned? Just Uncle Harris. But he's been taking really good care of me. The phone slipped from Victor's hand and clattered on the concrete floor. Harris Robbins, the sheriff who'd been first on the scene. The sheriff who'd controlled the investigation. The sheriff who'd had access to Victor's family, his home, his routines for years. Victor picked up the phone with hands that had started to shake. Angel, I need you to go to the bathroom and lock the door. Right now. Why, Daddy? You're scaring me. Please, sweetheart. Just do it. He heard her moving, heard a door close and a lock turn. Daddy, what's wrong? Angel, I need to know. Have you been staying with Sheriff Robbins this whole time? Yes. He said it was safer here while you and Mommy and Uncle Don work things out. He's been really nice, Daddy. He bought me new clothes and everything. Victor's mind reeled. Harris Robbins had been feeding him information from the beginning, controlling every aspect of the investigation. He'd been the one to suggest the body was Angel's. He'd been the one to discourage Victor from examining the scene too closely. And now he had Angel. Sweetheart, I need you to stay in that bathroom until I come get you. Don't come out for anyone except me. Do you understand? Daddy, you're really scaring me now. I know, baby, but I'm coming to get you. And Angel? Yes. I love you. No matter what anyone has told you, no matter what you might think, I love you more than anything in this world. There was a long pause. When Angel spoke again, her voice was small and confused. Daddy? I think I made a big mistake. The line went dead. Victor turned to Dawn, who was staring at him with a mixture of pain and dawning horror. You have no idea what you've gotten involved in, do you? Victor said quietly. Dawn shook his head weakly. Victor cut him down and helped him to a chair. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me everything, and I mean everything, about how this plan came together. Because I think you and Crystal thought you were running a simple extortion scheme, but you've actually been pawns in something much bigger. Don cradled his broken finger against his chest. What do you mean? I mean Harris Robbins has been playing all of us. And now he has my daughter. Victor's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Copeland, I believe you have something that belongs to me. I suggest we arrange a trade. Your friend Mr. Davies for your daughter. You have 1 hour to decide. Victor showed the message to Dawn, whose face went pale. He's going to kill us all, Dawn whispered. Victor's smile was terrifying in its complete lack of warmth. No, he said quietly. He's not. Chapter 6. The Perfect Trap. The Cascade County Sheriff's Department sat like a fortress against the night sky, its brick facade illuminated by harsh security lights that created deep pockets of shadow around the building's perimeter. Victor crouched in those shadows, watching the building through military-grade night vision goggles, cataloging entry points and security weaknesses with the cold efficiency of a man who'd done this before. Harris Robbins was inside. So was Angel. Victor's plan was simple, brutal, and guaranteed to work. He'd learned long ago that the most effective strategies were often the most direct ones. At exactly 11:47 p.m., the fire alarm at the county courthouse, 2 blocks away, began wailing. Within minutes, half the sheriff's department had responded to what appeared to be a major blaze threatening the building that housed all the county's legal records. Victor smiled in the darkness. The fire was nothing more than road flares and smoke bombs he'd placed in strategic locations, but it would take the fire department at least an hour to search the entire building and determine there was no real threat. By then, it would be over. Victor moved through the sheriff's department like a ghost, his military training serving him well. The skeleton crew left behind was focused on radio chatter from the courthouse, not on potential intrusions in their own building. He found Harris Robbins in his office, feet up on his desk, sipping coffee and listening to the chaos on his police radio with obvious amusement. Busy night, Victor said from the doorway. Harris spun around, his hand automatically reaching for his sidearm, but Victor was already moving. 20 years of military training versus 20 years of small-town law enforcement was hardly a fair fight. Harris hit the floor hard, his gun sliding across the linoleum to come to rest against the far wall. Victor stood over him, his own weapon drawn and steady. Where is she? Harris smiled, blood trickling from his split lip. Safe. For now. You know, Harris, I've been thinking about you a lot lately. How you were always so helpful, so concerned about my family's safety. How you just happened to be the first one on the scene when the cabin burned. How you controlled every aspect of the investigation. Victor kicked Harris's gun further away and sat down in the sheriff's chair. But what really got me thinking was something Angel said about you buying her new clothes. See, that suggested a level of preparation that doesn't fit with a spur-of-the-moment kidnapping. Harris struggled to sit up, his face twisted with pain and rage. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Then explain it to me. Your wife came to me 6 months ago, said she was afraid of you, afraid of what you might do if you found out about her affair. She wanted protection. Victor's finger tightened on the trigger. Keep going. She told me about your military background, your specialized skills. Said she was worried you might hurt her and Angel if you discovered the truth. So you decided to help her fake our daughter's death? Harris's laugh was bitter. I decided to protect a woman and child from a dangerous man. Everything else just evolved. Evolved into extortion and kidnapping. Evolved into an opportunity. Do you have any idea how much money you've made over the years? How much you've accumulated while the rest of us struggle to make ends meet? Victor leaned forward, his gray eyes boring into Harris's. So this was all about money. This was about justice. You and men like you. You take your blood money and buy your mountain retreats and your perfect little lives, while the people who actually serve and protect this community can barely afford to retire. Where is my daughter? Harris smiled again, and this time there was genuine malice in it. She's safe, like I said. In fact, she's probably having the time of her life. Turns out Angel is very interested in learning about real police work. Victor's blood went cold. What does that mean? It means she's been helping me with the investigation. Following leads, checking alibis, learning how we track down dangerous criminals. Harris's eyes glittered with sick amusement. She's particularly interested in learning how we handle armed and dangerous suspects. The implication hit Victor like a physical blow. Harris had been training Angel to betray him, to help in his own capture. You turned my daughter into bait. I turned your daughter into a survivor. Someone who understands that sometimes you have to choose sides, and it's better to be on the winning side. Victor's phone buzzed. Text message from Angel's number. Daddy, I'm at the old Miller farm on Route 9. Come alone, and come quickly. Uncle Harris says there isn't much time. Victor showed the message to Harris. How long have you been planning this? Long enough to make sure all the exits are covered. Harris struggled to his feet, his hand pressed against his ribs. You see, Victor, the problem with men like you is that you always think you're the smartest person in the room. You think your military training makes you invincible. It usually does. Not this time. Because this time, you're not fighting enemy combatants or terrorists. You're fighting people who know you, who understand how you think, who've had months to prepare for this exact moment. Victor's radio crackled with Harris's voice. A recording, he realized. All units, we have a 10 to 33 at the Miller farm. Suspect is armed and extremely dangerous. Use maximum caution. Harris smiled. I recorded that this afternoon. By the time you reach the farm, half the county will be surrounding it. And your daughter will be watching from the woods as her daddy gets taken down by the good guys. Victor looked at Harris with something approaching admiration. You really have thought of everything. Everything except one small detail. What's that? Victor's smile was absolutely terrifying. You assumed I was coming alone. The first explosion shook the building, followed immediately by the sound of automatic gunfire from the parking lot. Harris's face went white as he realized what was happening. You see, Harris, I may have left the military, but I never stopped working with certain specialists. Men who understand that some problems require extreme solutions. Victor's phone buzzed with an incoming call. He answered it on speaker. Package secured, a voice reported. 3 tangos down, 1 in custody. The girl is safe. Victor looked at Harris, whose face had gone ashen. My team reached the farm about 20 minutes ago. Amazing what you can accomplish with proper planning and superior firepower. This is impossible. We had lookouts, You had amateurs playing at being professionals. Victor stood up, keeping his weapon trained on Harris. The men I work with have been doing this since before you pinned on that badge. Another explosion, closer this time. The lights in the building flickered and went out. Boss, we're at your location. Building is secure. Victor activated a small flashlight, keeping the beam focused on Harris's face. You know what the really beautiful part is? By the time your fellow officers get back from that fake fire, they're going to find evidence of a massive corruption scandal. Bank records showing years of skimmed drug money, kickbacks from organized crime, even some very disturbing images on your personal computer. Harris's eyes went wide. You can't do this. I'm a law enforcement officer. You are a law enforcement officer. Now you're just another criminal who made the mistake of threatening my family. Heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. The door opened to reveal 3 men in tactical gear, their faces hidden behind night vision goggles. Sir, the building is clear. What are your orders? Victor looked down at Harris, who was now openly weeping. Take him to the secondary location. Make sure he understands exactly how much pain he's caused my family before you dispose of him. Victor, please. Harris gasped. I have a family too. Victor's expression didn't change. You should have thought about that before you involved mine in your schemes. As the tactical team dragged Harris away, Victor allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. But it was only a moment. There was still one more betrayer to deal with. Crystal was waiting. Chapter 7. The Wife's Reckoning. The safe house in the mountains looked exactly like what it was, a fortress designed by someone who understood that sometimes survival required complete isolation from the civilized world. Victor had purchased it through a series of shell companies 5 years ago, during a particularly dangerous contract in Eastern Europe. Now it would serve as the setting for the final act of his revenge. Crystal sat bound to a chair in the main room, her perfect makeup smeared with tears, her designer clothes torn and dirty. Beside her, Don Davies slumped in his own restraints, his face a map of bruises and his broken fingers splinted with medical tape. They'd both been unconscious when Victor's team delivered them, and the reality of their situation was only now beginning to sink in. Victor entered the room carrying a tray of medical instruments, each one clean and sharp and precisely arranged. He set the tray on a table where both captives could see it clearly. Good morning, he said pleasantly. I trust you both slept well. Crystal's response was a string of curses that would have made a sailor proud. Don just stared at the instruments with growing horror. Now, Victor chided. That's no way to talk to your husband, Crystal. Especially considering our current circumstances. You're insane, she spat. You can't just kidnap people, and I can do whatever I want, Victor interrupted, his voice remaining conversational. You see, according to official records, you and Don died in a car accident 3 days ago. Very tragic. Apparently, you were fleeing the scene of a kidnapping when you lost control on a mountain curve. Victor picked up a photograph from the table and showed it to them. It depicted a burned-out car at the bottom of a ravine, 2 bodies visible in the front seats. DNA evidence will eventually prove those aren't your bodies, of course. But by then, the case will be closed, the insurance money will be paid, and I'll be free to grieve my deceased wife and her lover in private. Don found his voice. Victor, please. We can work something out. The money, we can give it all back. The money. Victor laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. Don, you still don't understand. This was never about money. He walked to a window that looked out over the mountain wilderness. Miles of forest stretched in every direction, broken only by the occasional dirt road or hunting trail. This is about betrayal. This is about 2 people I trusted with my life, with my daughter's life, who decided that their happiness was worth destroying everything I held dear. Victor turned back to face them, and both captives shrank back at the expression in his eyes. But most of all, this is about consequences. You see, in my line of work, there are very clear rules about what happens to people who betray their partners. Very clear, very permanent consequences. He selected a scalpel from the tray and tested its edge against his thumb. Crystal, let's start with you. I want you to tell me about the first time you decided I had to die. I never wanted you to die. I just wanted out. Wrong answer. Victor made a small cut on Crystal's forearm, just deep enough to draw blood. Her scream echoed off the cabin walls. You see, I've had 3 days to review all your communications, all your financial records, all your little plans. I know about the life insurance policies you took out on me. I know about the inquiries you made into my will. I know about the accidents you researched on the internet. Another cut, slightly deeper. So let's try this again. When did you first decide I had to die? Crystal was sobbing now, her perfect composure completely shattered. Last Christmas, when you gave Angel that new rifle and taught her how to use it, I realized you were turning our daughter into a killer, just like you. Victor paused, the scalpel hovering over her arm. I was teaching her to protect herself. You were teaching her that violence solves problems, that people who cross you deserve to be hurt. People who cross me do deserve to be hurt. He made another cut, this one on her other arm. Tell me about Angel's involvement. She volunteered, Don said suddenly, his voice hoarse with pain. When Crystal told her about the plan, Angel said she wanted to help. Victor's attention shifted to Don. Explain. She said she was tired of pretending to be your perfect little daughter. Said she wanted to see what would happen if someone finally stood up to you. The scalpel found Don's shoulder, slicing through his shirt to the skin beneath. Keep talking. She helped us plan the phone call, the fake death scene. She even suggested using a body from the morgue. Said it would be more convincing than just burning down an empty cabin. Victor's hand stilled. What body? Don's face went pale as he realized what he'd revealed. A homeless woman. Harris got it from the county morgue. Angel said no one would miss her. The scalpel clattered to the floor as Victor stepped back, his face contorting with rage and disgust. My daughter, my 11-year-old daughter, suggested desecrating a corpse? She said it was just like the movies, Crystal whispered. She said you'd taught her that some people don't matter as much as others. Victor grabbed Crystal by the throat, his fingers tightening until she began to turn blue. I never taught her that. I taught her to value life, to protect the innocent. You taught her to be like you. Crystal gasped. Cold, calculating, willing to do anything to win. Victor released her and stepped back, his chest heaving. In the silence that followed, he could hear his own heartbeat, loud and fast in his ears. Where is she now? Safe, Don said quickly. She's with my sister in Canada. New identity, new life. She'll never have to see you again. Victor's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Unknown number. He answered without speaking. Hello, Daddy. Angel's voice was different now. Older, harder, completely lacking the innocence he remembered. I suppose Uncle Don told you about my suggestions for the plan. I hope you're not too disappointed in me. Victor's grip tightened on the phone. Where are you? Close enough to watch. Far enough to stay safe. I learned that from you, remember? Always have an exit strategy. Through the window, Victor could see a small figure on a distant ridge, too far away to reach, but close enough to observe everything happening in the cabin. Why, Angel? Why did you do this? Because I wanted to see if you really were the monster everyone said you were. And guess what, Daddy? You are. The phone went dead. Victor stared out the window at the distant figure, understanding finally flooding through him. This had all been a test, engineered by his own daughter to prove to herself that he was capable of the kind of brutality she'd only heard whispered about. And he'd passed her test with flying colors. Victor looked at Crystal and Dawn, both watching him with fear and desperate hope, waiting to see what he would do next. He picked up the scalpel. Angel was right about one thing, he said quietly. I am exactly the monster you all thought I was. What happened next in that isolated cabin would never be officially recorded. But 3 days later, when Victor Copeland emerged from the mountains alone, he was carrying the kind of satisfaction that comes from a job completed with absolute thoroughness. Justice, he'd learned, was sometimes a very personal thing. Chapter 8. The Daughter's Gambit. Victor found Angel at their old fishing spot by Sterling Lake, the place where he'd taught her to cast a line when she was 6 years old. She sat on the familiar fallen log, her legs swinging over the water, looking for all the world like the innocent child she'd once been. But the rifle across her lap told a different story. Hello, Daddy. Victor approached slowly, his hands visible and empty. Even now, even knowing what she'd done, his instinct was to protect her. Hello, sweetheart. Did you enjoy your time at the cabin? Angel's voice carried a casual curiosity, as if she were asking about his day at the office. It was educational. Angel smiled, the same bright expression that had once melted his heart. Now it made his blood run cold. I thought it might be. I've been watching through the scope for the past hour. You're very thorough in your work. Victor stopped about 10 feet away, close enough to talk, far enough to react if necessary. How long have you been planning this? Since I was 9. That's when I first started understanding what you really did for a living. All those consulting trips, all those mysterious phone calls, all those nights when you'd come home covered in other people's blood. Angel shifted the rifle slightly, not quite pointing it at him, but making it clear she could if needed. I started researching you online. Do you know how many people have died because of your work? How many families you've destroyed? Those were bad people, Angel. People who hurt innocents. According to who? According to you. Angel's laugh was bitter, too old for her 11-year-old face. You appointed yourself judge, jury, and executioner for anyone who crossed your path. Victor felt something crack inside his chest. I was protecting people. I was protecting you. You were teaching me that violence is the answer to everything. That people who betray you deserve to die. That some lives matter more than others. Angel stood up, the rifle now clearly aimed at Victor's chest. So I decided to give you exactly what you taught me. A world where betrayal has consequences. Where people who cross you pay the ultimate price. I never wanted you to become like me. Then you should have been a better example. They stood there in silence for a long moment, father and daughter, predator and prey, teacher and student. The lake lapped gently at the shore, indifferent to the tragedy playing out on its banks. You're going to kill me, Victor said. It wasn't a question. I'm going to give you a choice. The same choice you gave Mommy and Uncle Don. Angel reached into her jacket and pulled out a small bottle of pills. Poison. Quick, relatively painless. Or, she gestured with the rifle. We can do this the hard way. Victor looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw himself reflected in her cold, calculating eyes. Every lesson he'd taught her about strategy and survival, every demonstration of ruthlessness she'd witnessed, every moment when he'd chosen efficiency over mercy had led to this moment. What happens after? He asked. After you're gone? I disappear. New identity, new life, new family. Uncle Harris set it all up before you killed him. And Crystal and Dawn. Angel shrugged. Collateral damage. They were useful for the plan, but they were never meant to survive it. I needed them to bring out your true nature, to prove to myself that you really were the monster I thought you were. Victor felt a strange sense of pride mixing with his horror. Angel had played everyone, her mother, Dawn, Harris, even Victor himself, with the skill of a master manipulator. She'd orchestrated an elaborate psychological experiment designed to expose the darkness in his soul. And she'd succeeded brilliantly. You know I can't take the poison, Victor said. I know. You're too proud, too stubborn. You'd rather go down fighting. That's not why. Angel tilted her head, curious. I can't take the poison because that would be giving up. And I never give up on family. Before Angel could react, Victor was moving. 20 years of combat training versus 11 years of childhood, even accelerated by intelligence and planning, was still no contest. The rifle fired, but Victor was already diving to the side. The bullet split the air where he'd been standing and buried itself in a tree behind him. Angel tried to work the bolt for a second shot, but Victor was on her before she could chamber another round. The rifle went flying, splashing into the lake with a metallic crash. They rolled on the ground, father and daughter locked in a desperate struggle. Angel fought with surprising strength and skill. She'd learned well from watching him, but she was still a child in an adult's body. Victor pinned her arms and looked down into her face, seeing his own ruthlessness reflected in her eyes. I'm sorry, he whispered. Angel smiled up at him. For what? For making me exactly what you are. For failing you as a father. You didn't fail me, Daddy. You taught me everything I needed to know about survival. Angel's hand moved slightly, and Victor felt the sharp pain of a blade sliding between his ribs. She'd had a backup plan, just like he'd taught her. As Victor's strength began to ebb, Angel squirmed out from under him and stood up, looking down at her dying father with something that might have been love. Thank you, she said quietly, for showing me exactly who I never want to become. Victor tried to speak, but blood filled his mouth. He watched as Angel walked to the lake's edge and retrieved the rifle, water dripping from its barrel. Don't worry, Daddy. I'm not going to become like you. I'm going to be something much worse. Angel checked the rifle's action, making sure it would still fire despite its dunking. I'm going to be someone who kills monsters. The last thing Victor Copeland saw was his daughter walking away into the forest, carrying the weapon he'd taught her to use, on her way to hunt down the kind of people he'd once been hired to eliminate. In the end, his greatest success and his ultimate failure were the same thing. He'd created a predator more dangerous than himself. Justice, it seemed, had a sense of irony. Chapter 9, The Monster's Legacy. 5 years later. The newspaper headline read, Mysterious Vigilante Strikes Again. International War Criminal Found Dead in Swiss Hideout. Below it, a smaller story detailed the discovery of Anton Volkov, a man wanted for genocide in 3 countries, found executed in his heavily guarded compound with surgical precision. Detective Stuart Ross set down the newspaper and looked across his desk at the file that had been consuming his life for the past 18 months. 16 cases spread across 4 continents, all bearing the same signature. Meticulous planning, perfect execution, and targets who were universally regarded as monsters who had escaped justice through wealth, connections, or political protection. The press had dubbed the killer the Reaper, but Stewart suspected the truth was far more complex and terrifying. Any new leads on the vigilante cases? Detective Emmett Goodman asked, settling into the chair across from Stewart's desk. Maybe. I've been working on the psychological profile, trying to understand what drives someone to hunt war criminals and corrupt officials with this level of precision. Stewart opened the file and spread out crime scene photos. Each one showed the same pattern. The target found dead, usually by poison or a single gunshot, with evidence of extensive surveillance and planning. What's interesting is the targets themselves. These aren't random killings. Each victim was someone who had committed atrocities against civilians, particularly children. Someone with access to international intelligence networks and military-grade training. Emmett studied the photos. Former military? CIA. That's what we thought initially. But look at this. Stewart pulled out a map marked with red pins showing the locations of each killing. If you follow the timeline and geographical pattern, it tells a story. The killer started in the Pacific Northwest 5 years ago, then moved systematically across the country and eventually internationally. Always staying ahead of law enforcement. Always choosing targets that local authorities couldn't or wouldn't pursue. You think they're American? I think they're very young, extremely intelligent, and operating with resources that suggest either government backing or access to significant private funding. Stewart's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and saw it was his contact at Interpol. Ross here. Stewart, we've got another one. This time it's Viktor Petrov, the Russian arms dealer who's been selling weapons to terrorist organizations in Africa. Stewart grabbed a pen. Where? Monaco. Same MO, single gunshot. No witnesses, perfect escape. But this time, we might have caught a break. What kind of break? Security footage from a nearby hotel. We can't see the shooter clearly, but we got a partial profile. Stewart, I think our vigilante might be a teenager. Stewart felt his blood run cold. A teenager with the skills to eliminate international criminals was either a prodigy, trained by professionals, or something much more disturbing. Send me everything you have. I'll be on the next flight to Monaco. After ending the call, Stewart stared at the map of killings, a new pattern beginning to emerge. He pulled out a different file, one he'd kept separate from the vigilante investigation, and opened it to a 5-year-old missing persons report. Angel Copeland, age 11, disappeared from the Pacific Northwest around the same time the vigilante killings began. Father, Viktor Copeland, deceased, former military contractor with specialized skills in elimination and extraction. Mother, Crystal Copeland, deceased, killed in what authorities believed was a murder-suicide involving her husband. Stewart had dismissed the connection initially. What could an 11-year-old girl have to do with international assassinations? But now, looking at the timeline and the methodical nature of the killings, a horrifying possibility was taking shape. His computer chimed with an email from Interpol. The Monaco security footage was attached. Stewart opened the video file and watched grainy black and white footage of a figure moving through a hotel lobby. The image quality was poor, but there was something about the person's movement, their size, that supported his growing suspicion. He enhanced the image as much as possible and studied the figure's face. What he saw made his hands shake. It was definitely a teenager. Female, blonde hair, moving with the confidence and precision of someone far older and more experienced. Stewart reached for his phone and dialed his supervisor. Captain, I need to request international cooperation on the vigilante case. I think I know who we're looking for, and if I'm right, we're dealing with something unprecedented. What do you mean? I mean we're hunting a 16-year-old girl who's been systematically eliminating some of the world's most dangerous criminals for the past 5 years. And based on her success rate, she's better at it than most government assassins. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. How sure are you about this? Stewart looked at the photo of Angel Copeland in her missing persons file, a smiling 11-year-old with bright eyes and an innocent expression that gave no hint of what she would become. Sure enough to recommend that we approach this very, very carefully. Because if Angel Copeland is our vigilante, then we're not just dealing with a killer. We're dealing with someone who learned from one of the most dangerous men in the world how to hunt human predators. What's your recommendation? Stewart closed the file and stared out his office window at the busy street below, thinking about a little girl who had been shaped by violence and is something the world had never seen before. We find her before she decides we're the monsters who need to be eliminated. The phone went dead, leaving Stewart alone with the growing certainty that Angel Copeland, if that was still her name, was out there somewhere, planning her next hunt. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice wondered if the world might actually be a better place with monsters like her in it. After all, someone had to hunt the hunters. In a small cafe in Prague, a young woman with carefully dyed brown hair closed her laptop and smiled at the news report playing on the television above the bar. Viktor Petrov's death was already making international headlines, with various governments expressing relief that the arms dealer would no longer be able to supply weapons to terrorist organizations. Angel Copeland, now going by the name Sarah Chun, gathered her belongings and left a generous tip for the waitress. She had a train to catch and another monster to find. As she walked through the crowded streets of Prague, she thought about her father and the lessons he'd taught her. He'd been right about one thing. The world was full of predators who preyed on the innocent. He'd just been wrong about who should be hunting them. Viktor Copeland had created a monster to fight monsters. And his monster was very, very good at her job. In her pocket, Angel's phone buzzed with a message from one of her many information sources. A new target had been identified, a human trafficker operating out of Bangkok who specialized in selling children to the highest bidder. Angel smiled and quickened her pace. She had work to do. The student had become the teacher, and the world's monsters were about to learn what justice really looked like when it came from someone who truly understood the nature of evil. After all, it takes a monster to catch a monster. And Angel Copeland was the best monster her father had ever created. Epilogue. Detective Stuart Ross never did catch Angel Copeland. Over the next 3 years, the vigilante killings continued across 6 continents, each one more precise and audacious than the last. The death toll of international criminals, corrupt officials, and human predators climbed into the dozens. Governments quietly stopped investigating the killings. After all, Angel only targeted people who richly deserved to die, people who had escaped justice through wealth, political connections, or geographic isolation. The world became a slightly safer place, one dead monster at a time. And somewhere in the shadows, a young woman who had learned the art of hunting from the most dangerous teacher imaginable continued her father's work, not as he had taught her, but as she had chosen to interpret his lessons. Viktor Copeland had wanted to create a weapon. Instead, he had created justice. Cold, brutal, unforgiving justice that would never stop hunting until every monster was dead. His daughter had indeed learned everything he had to teach her. She had simply chosen to be better at it than he ever was. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.